Hi, Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another bass effects review video. Today, I am going to be getting into the ridiculously gorgeous, lush, expansive sounds from the CXM 1978 Reverb from the collaboration between Bliss Audio and Meris. Now, right off the bat, is the CXM 1978 for everybody? Of course not. Look at it. It's ridiculous. It's huge. It's a little bit over the top. It's incredibly expensive. But there is something incredibly unique about the Automatone line, specifically with the tactility and the feedback you get back from the pedal. Now, this is something that I have become more and more aware of how much I enjoy in a pedal, is the ability to immediately tweak and change and see my changes happen instantly on the pedal. No menus, no LED screens, no secondary functions. All those things are great. I have a lot of pedals that have those characteristics, but it's not as fun. It's not as interactive. It doesn't feel as much like an instrument. The CXM feels like its own little mini instrument. And when you click to a different preset, you instantly know what your settings are and what's happening on the pedal because everything is visibly apparent. Now, beyond the physicality of the pedal, I'm going to say right up front, Meris and Bliss have designed some of the best reverb DSP algorithms I have ever heard in my life. I'm running this video in stereo because the stereo field is absolutely gorgeous. Now, stereo isn't going to be everybody's thing, but this thing is based off of old rack units that were kind of the go-to studio session rack reverbs of the time in a pedal format, and I really feel like not putting it in stereo, you're just not getting the full vibe that they're going for here. So let's not waste any more time. I'm going to go through a quick rundown of what the controls are because they're honestly not very confusing. They're pretty straightforward. But before we get into anything, here is my bass's dry tone Dingwall ABZ 6-string on the neck pickup. So let's start with the faders or the sliders. This is obviously the most kind of wow factor of the pedal. So they are true mechanical faders that remember exactly where they're supposed to go and slide around with your presets, or if you have an expression pedal plugged in, you can see real time the faders moving around with the expression pedal. So the first fader on the right here is pre-delay, and it's a pretty straightforward control, but it is very interactive with the clock. And the clock is kind of the heart of what sets the quality of all of the reverbs of the pedal. So when you're in hi-fi, this is the most pristine, kind of modern, crystal clear reverbs that you can imagine. And the pre-delay when you're in the hi-fi mode goes from about 0 milliseconds up to around 40. When you switch to standard, this is kind of giving you the quality of reverb you would have gotten from those rack units of days of yore, and your pre-delay now goes up to about 160, 170 milliseconds. Now, when you switch to lo-fi is where things get pretty special for this pedal. It's going into kind of almost a very low sample rate, kind of bit crusty lo-fi effect here, and your pre-delay goes all the way up to almost 2 seconds. I think it's 1.7 seconds. Moving along, things are pretty straightforward. We have a mix slider. This is essentially your dry versus your wet. We have a treble, which is not really just a treble filter. It's really the amount of reverb time or reverb decay of the treble frequencies. And now going on to the bass and mids control, they're a little bit kind of deceptively powerful. They are the reverb time for the bass and the mids frequencies, but those frequencies are completely dependent on the very important cross slider. So the way that I think of the cross slider is essentially your split of what frequencies go to bass and what frequencies go to mids. So if you have cross pulled all the way down like this, you're essentially saying, I want everything to go to the mids because every frequency is above the cross. If I had it in the middle, then you're saying anything below the cross is going to the bass, anything above the cross is going to the mids. And if you had it all the way up, it's kind of the opposite of the first one I did. Nothing is going to mids because everything is below the cross. So I really want to make sure that you understand what the cross slider is actually doing because it's very important to how the reverb functions. So right now, if I have bass all the way off and I have cross all the way down, essentially we're sending all of the frequencies to the mid band. So now all of my volume of most of the reverb tail is controlled by this one slider. And also, as I slide the cross slider up, since this is completely off, you're essentially just cutting out low frequencies. So as you move this up, it goes from a very bassy full reverb to a thinner reverb to a very thin reverb. Now, obviously, where this gets really powerful is you can kind of EQ out certain portions of your sound. So, for instance, if you want a bassy reverb, but you still want a little bit of those mid-range frequencies, you could crank the bass way up, pull the mids down, and since cross is right in the middle, essentially the lower frequencies are being sent to here, and the higher frequencies are being sent to here, and you get a reverb that sounds like this. Very full-bodied and low. Now, flipping the sliders, since cross is in the middle, we're getting a lot of those upper frequencies sent to mids and not very many sent to bass. And you get a thinner reverb tail. And then very quickly, moving on to the arcade buttons on the bottom, these are very straightforward. Jump is just a way to, when you save a preset, you can have it jump to either preset 0 or 5 when you click the preset button. So normally you're cycling one at a time. But for instance, if I'm on preset 6 and I had saved it with jump on at 0, when I press preset, it's automatically going to jump to preset 0. Or vice versa, if I had it set to red, which is 5, it would jump automatically to 5. Type, what you would assume, it's the 3 algorithms or types of reverb: room, plate, and hall. They're all gorgeous. We're going to get to them in a minute. Diffusion is basically how smeared your reverb tail is. So is it a little bit more like individual particulates, or is it more kind of this smeared wash? Tank mod is just how much modulation is on the reverb. Low is kind of barely there, but very pretty, very subtle. Medium is pretty murky and moving around slowly still. And then high is almost like a fast vibrato or kind of like a Leslie modulation on the reverb tail. And then clock, as I said before, is just the overall fidelity of your reverb, but also the length of your pre-delay. So let's start with the room reverb, kind of the simplest, most straightforward reverb on here. I don't use rooms a lot because they're a little subtle, but this is a great way to just kind of liven up your sound when you're recording direct in, for instance. So the bypassed sound on my bass sounds like this again. And now here is going into the room reverb. Notice that the decay times are all completely off. So very subtle, but it still adds a little bit of kind of breath or body. Now, if I turn up all of the reverbs just a little bit, we get into more of kind of a echoey room. Now, don't be tricked by the fact that this is called room, because as you start turning the decay times up, you can get into some pretty massive reverbs. But in the middle, we get into kind of a very large room, or maybe even like a small hall. And then just for fun, if we crank the reverb times all the way up, even in the room mode, it gets pretty big. Another simple room setting here, but quite a different EQ. So for one, I've switched to standard, which again reduces the quality of the delay back to what it would have sounded like basically in the 80s. And I've added a little bit of pre-delay, so we have kind of a little bit of an echo right before the start of it. Notice that the cross is sending out kind of most of the frequencies are still going to the mid, but we're getting more bass frequencies. So this is a really bass, boomy room reverb with a little bit of echo. Sounds like this. let's hear this particular setting with a little bit more of a bassy frequency. So this is my Boss OC2 octaver running as a traditional octaver. Sounds like this. Into this kind of bigger, almost oil can-like reverb. Let's hear what a little bit of overdrive sounds like running into the room reverb. So this is my Dark Glass Alpha Omicron. It sounds like this by itself. Running into this room reverb. Moving on to plate. Now, I will say that normally I'm more of a hall reverb person, and hall is still my favorite type of reverb on the CXM. But this is the best plate reverb I've ever played with, hands down. It also, I think, is one of the best places to demonstrate some of the diffusion and tank mod characteristics of the pedal, so we're going to start with that right now. So starting with diffusion, I'm just going to play essentially a muted note so you can hear the way the reverb decays. And now when it's on low, it's going to be a little bit more separated and particulate, and then as it goes towards high, it gets more smeared and smooth. Quickly, let's cycle through the tank mods. So starting with low, then going medium, then high on this particular plate setting. Just to give you a quick demonstration as well of what the clock button does. In hi-fi, which is what I've been playing in most of the time, yet again, it's very pristine, it's very pretty. As I go to standard, you're going to hear a little bit of upper end hiss on the reverb, and also the pre-delay is going to get quite a bit longer. And then when we go to lo-fi, it's going to get what it sounds like, very lo-fi. It's going to be very low sample rate, a lot of hiss, and a much bigger pre-delay. Now, I'm going to come back to plate quite a bit and a lot more sound samples at the end, mixing with some pedals, but I want to go on to hall for a second because this is my personal favorite on the pedal. Starting with just a nice big hall settings as shown. Now, one very lovely kind of hidden feature on the Hall mode is if we go to low diffusion, you get kind of a very particulate rich reverb. It almost sounds like a multi-tap delay. But here's the exact same settings, but in low diffusion. If you're not listening with headphones on, you should put some on and listen to that last sound sample because the stereo field is gorgeous. So one of my favorite sounds to run into kind of big, bassy Hall reverbs is some kind of synth bass. So I'm going to run my Boss OC2 into a gated fuzz into my Moog low-pass filter. That sounds like this by itself. Now into the settings on the CXM as shown. Just to give a quick comparison of reverb types, this is the exact same thing except I'm running into the plate mode. Now everyone knows who watches my channel that I love big textural soundscape effects. And so far I've been showing relatively tame reverbs, but the CXM can go pretty out there if you want it to, and pretty freaking huge. So this is a massive Hall reverb with lo-fi mode enabled, a little bit of tank mod, and very high diffusion, which in a second I'll show actually has a little bit of a delay feature built in as well. Exact same settings, except hi-fi instead of lo-fi. So one last little hidden feature that I haven't really talked about yet on the CXM is when you have diffusion set in high, your pre-delay gets a little bit of regeneration added to it. So it actually turns it into kind of like a very smeared delay. And in lo-fi mode, it gives you these awesome kind of bit crushed repeats. And as you slide the pre-delay slider up and down, it acts very similar to how like an analog delay would work, where you'll hear the delay time try to catch up or get to the current setting. let's start a little bit textural. I have my Electro-Harmonix Hog 2 on, and what it's doing is essentially bringing in upper end harmonics slowly as my note decays. So it's kind of like a shimmer without the reverb. So it sounds like this by itself. Now, when you run this into the CXM, specifically on this very kind of lo-fi room setting here, we're going to get kind of a lo-fi shimmer reverb. Same sound, but now running into a plate in standard mode. And same sound, but Hall in hi-fi mode with low diffusion, so giving me those little particulates. Going a little more bass-centric, I have my Dark Glass Alpha Omicron turned back on, but with quite a bit more drive, so we're getting this almost kind of distorted, fuzzy sound. And running that into this particular room reverb. Going back to my Electro-Harmonix Hog 2, I have my dry signal running, but now I'm also running a fifth and an octave up on top of that signal, so it sounds like this, which I can control with my foot to kick it up another octave. Let's hear that into this plate reverb. So one more preset for you. This is just a classic pretty Hall on the CXM, and I'm running just a little bit of overdrive from that dark glass pedal. It sounds like this by itself. Let's hear what it sounds like into this Hall reverb. Okay, I lied. One more sound for you because I found this kind of neat lo-fi plate thing when I was messing around a second ago. This is the reverb by itself. And now into that, I am going to run my freeze gliss setting from my Electro-Harmonix Hog 2. It sounds like this by itself. And now both together. So that is my demo of the CXM 1978, an incredible collaboration from Chase Bliss Audio and Meris. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It really does help me out, and I will be back shortly with more pedals and effects review videos as well as some performance videos. As always, thank you so much for watching. Bye.